Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Are we ready for roll call?
Yes.
All right.
Mayor James.
Here.
Vice Mayor Evans. Commissioner Jameson.
Here.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Williams advised to be able to play.
All right. Thank you. All right. Ready?
Yes, ma'am. Let's go.
Okay. Our first item, or our only item, is the discussion on Resolution 2017-G, which establishes rates for multi-users for water and wastewater services. All right. You want to go first?
Sure, I can go first.
Okay.
The reason we had the ordinance put in there, and one of our goals for the city was to treat everybody the same. It was clear that over the last few years that we were not collecting garbage from some, collecting from others, and then we were looking at the entire operation. It came down to that there were some businesses that had 1 meter and had numerous businesses associated with it.
Bobby.
And so we are really talking about 24 businesses. These are businesses that have 1 meter, and there's a lot of other businesses associated with that meter. And so in looking, we were maybe a little aggressive in the last ordinance, and there's some people that wound up paying an additional $300 to $400 for that particular meter. So we went out and looked at numerous cities throughout the United States and here, the Lake City being the closest that has this, and they call it a master meter. And basically it is that meter, 1 meter, that's there that services numerous other businesses. It is also the meter that's in a trailer park that services numerous trailers in that park, and they use a master meter because the trailers come and go often, and so they use 1 meter. In this case, the buildings were built before 1970, and maybe our code approved it or maybe it didn't, we can't tell, but for sure they're being treated slightly different than everybody else that has an individual meter. So we re-looked at and we came up with a different scheme. Now this is a workshop, so this is just meant as a talking point. And certainly the council can we'll take your ideas and then put them into another scheme before we put it into an ordinance. So this one basically has blocks, and I'll let Jennifer explain that.
So, and this, everybody right now that was getting the multi-user has a 3/4 inch meter. So we don't need to tier the different meters because all of them are on the 3/4, and nobody new goes on as a multi-user. Anybody new has their own meter. So we know that they're all going to be 3/4.
Okay.
So what this is it's got a base rate. Every commercial customer pays a base rate. So that would be block 1. Block 1 is your typical commercial, 1 business. That's what they pay for their base rate. So what we did, block 2 is for, put my glasses on, for anybody that's 2 users, and basically that is the base rate of block 1 that all commercials users are doing, and 25% of an additional user. So if the second business would be 25% above what the commercial user is that has just one customer. Anybody that has, in block 3 is 3 to 4 that are on 1 meter, they pay the base rate plus 50% of the base rate. And then block 4 is base rate plus 75%. And then block 6 is anybody 7 or more businesses, and they basically pay for 2 base rates, which is vastly different from the way that we did it. And I hope that makes sense. Does anybody have any questions about any of the blocks? Or how? And so your bottom here is where your total is. And then, of course, that doesn't count your consumption. Your consumption is then added in. Yes, sir.
On the last one, block 5, you got 7. If you got 7 users or more, we pay $49.44 plus how much?
$49.44.
$98. You double the price.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the total base fees would be $117.04.
Right, that
You
would
got
be.
water.
He was talking plus the water. He was talking about, I'm assuming, the sewer.
The maximum anybody would pay, Dean, would be 2 base rates. You would not get into 4 or
I
5.
understand why. My meter has been that way for 25
Yeah.
years.
It is.
Registered every drop of water that goes into that building. And I paid for years, I paid $146 a month for water, sewer, garbage, and everything. And I got a bill in May for $430. And I had 3 tenants who told me, I advertised my building or rent, including utilities, because it was Chevrolet dealership. It's got 1 meter, it's got 2 meters and 1 water meter. And it was empty when I bought it in 1975. It was boarded up, had 10 roof for doors. And I worked hard to get it where it is. And I've got 3 tenants that if I raise their rent, they're gonna leave. One of them left already. So you all are talking about how much you love economic development. This is anti-economic development. I can tell you that. All I wanna know is one question. You charged me in May $430. And I wanna know if you're gonna give me that back, give me credit or what? Does that make any sense to y'all? I'm used to paying the city $146. I paid it always. We're never late. Never been late. No late fees. But now I had to pay $430. You can do the math. I can't do it in my head. But $430 against 146 is about $290 somewhere in that neighborhood. And we got a lot of people that's in worse shape than that. Some of these guys have got overselling, and you're punishing them. I paid for the services the city furnishes, and the statutes say that you can't charge a taxpayer for something unless you give him value received for what you charge him. I don't think you are, unless you want to put a meter in every one of my buildings and it would have been paid for by the grant. That's not what I want you to do. I work hard to get people to come to High Springs. I can name you some here. And these groups here that are here to oppose this thing, this is just a smidgen of the people in High Springs that are grossly upset. I called a bunch of them today. But everybody having this meeting at 4:30 makes it hard to get here. Few of us can leave whenever we want to. I'm not caught up. I hope I never catch up, because if I catch up, I'm out of a job. But I would like to lighten up a little bit. But I don't want to lighten up so much that I lose the building. I went through a crisis in '89 that everybody went through, and we're fixing to go through another one, when income was not as much as outgo. And when you get in that position, you're going to go broke unless you're a government, and then you just tax the payers that are already overtaxed. We're the highest taxed county in the whole state. And I think we may be the second highest city in the whole state. And I don't want anything special. I don't expect special treatment. We've told you all, and we've talked about it being fair. I told you, go to the fairground in Lake City in the fall of the year. This thing has never been fair. One of the commissioners that voted for this thing told me if she had known what it was going to happen, she would have never voted for it. Jones Edmond told us we could get the whole 5 phases for $16 million. We've already spent over $20 million and don't have but 2 phases. So, you know, we just got jerked around by people. Those grinder pumps. I got a letter here to say that 1 month, Mr. Boozle said they were saving 425 of them failed. Ms. Weller thought that it was people's fault. They were using them, they were abusing them. That's not true. It just didn't last. And now they're out of warranty. We'll go back. I've got all the stuff. Can I get an answer? The mayor's not here, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
she's here.
right here.
I'm right
You're
here.
the mayor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Lord.
That's all right. Not a problem.
I thought he's the assistant.
Right. He's the vice
This
mayor.
is crucial to economic development. What this was done, and it had all kind of unexpected consequences.
Mm-hmm.
To the point, like I say, I've got two people, one left, and I got two people. If I raise theirs, they're gonna leave. So I'm not gonna raise it, I'm gonna pay it. But I wanna know, can I get back what I already paid since you're gonna start over? Who knows that answer, anybody?
You have to ask the council.
As the council.
Yeah.
This is a workshop. They can't make any decisions.
No, I know that, I just wonder how
It's
they're
just,
thinking.
right.
About it, but some of us paying it out want to know,
Right.
I called the wrong person and asked that question, I apologize. I should never go to the direct department. I was told I would not get it back. It was legal because it was in effect those 2 months. But I think the commission, if reconsiders their decision, you ought to reconsider whether you refund the money. Personally.
Now, it only
Ask yourself, is
affects,
what we're doing legal, have y'all checked the legality of this?
yes.
I've got some opinions of the high attorneys that said this is not legal.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into that.
Okay, yes.
I have just a couple of questions. I know you told me how many businesses were affected. but I
Right.
didn't write down the number. Could you please repeat that?
24.
So there's 24 businesses at this moment that are being affected.
Actually, it's 20, I think.
20, okay.
Yeah.
How much revenue is this annually going to bring into the city? What was the reason for doing it?
The reason wasn't revenue. It was being fair. If I have a building and every one of my tenants has a water meter to it, I can turn to you and say, well, how come you don't have to do that?
Okay, so, and I'm not trying to be disagreeable, but, if you have two families sharing a house that aren't married or whatever, it's a similar situation to the situation I'm in. There's one bathroom in the building. There's one toilet, one sink, one bathroom. And so being charged a second set of fees when we're roommates, essentially, if we don't have separate entrances, we don't have separate, it's one house that we are sharing.
Sure.
So I know there's different situations, and some of them are different separate units. So that would be my first question. So I think that you need to consider some sort, if you are going to put fees like this in place, you're adding to my situation $179.76 a year that I have to pay out, because the person that I'm paying my rent to, it's not fair for her to absorb that when our agreement was made based on what the situation was. So perhaps you need to consider a variance based on current leases that are in place at this time on an individual basis for each of these. Mr. Davis has a building that he has lots of leases on. You can't just go into a tenant and say, oh, by the way, I'm going to charge you another whatever, nor can you recoup that from whatever rent arrangement you make. So that would be a suggestion I would make. What happens if the other business leaves? Okay, let's say I leave over at Wisteria Cottage. Do you immediately stop that? Because then, how do we get that reversed? Because track history is trying to get something stopped can be very challenging sometimes, okay? Could you look at perhaps maybe adding, as new businesses come on, fees to the occupational license process to the business versus to the landlord? That might be a way with those buildings to do it on a case-by-case basis. But I stood up here and I told you when I came here, I am a small business owner. I've had an occupational license in this city for 18 years. And I have worked my butt off to keep my head above water. And I've expanded and gone down. And we want people in these stores. We want people in these businesses trying to succeed. because you don't want it to look like it did in the 80s with nobody in those storefronts. We have a downtown, we have a community that hopefully is supporting our small businesses. And you know, the burden of financial that falls on us, not just from the city, but like over this summer, I paid 2 license fees to the state. I had 24 CEUs that I had to pay for. I had to pay an inspection fee to the health department. It's just one thing after another, and it doesn't feel, as Dean said, very business friendly. If it's only 24 businesses, is it really crucial to alienate those people at this point and maybe phase this in as leases expire and see if you can do it in a way that will be easier for the businesses to work with?
Not only that, that people didn't set out to do this in their businesses. They didn't, just something that happened 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And now they're getting slammed with this thing that doesn't seem fair. We're not supposed to support the sewer system ourselves, individually, 20 people. Supposed to be everybody pays in. So why you would try to go into just 20 people in the whole city doesn't seem quite fair. Unless you're willing to put meters on all of those units. And if we can do that, I wouldn't care. It's so much easier for me. But you guys have to build it. I'm saving you money because you don't have to build it. You don't have to read that meter. So maybe, picking on us 20, find somebody else to.
Let me say something. This is not picking on anyone, and we're going to disagree to a certain on some of this stuff. This is a situation where we got a unit, and whether you like the system or you don't like the system, in my opinion, I'm speaking for myself, is irrelevant. We have it. We have an ordinance on site, and we need to be self-sustaining. I can't speak to what other commissions did in the past. I can only tell you that whatever other commissions in the past, they stalled it. This thing should have been built out already. We stopped.
Don't blame us.
I'm not blaming you. Hold on a second. You're saying blame you. What about everybody who has abided by the ordinance since it became in effect? I have 3 people in my subdivision who aren't on it. Why? Because the commission didn't make them do it when they did it. I paid since I got in there. So let's make sure we understand. This is about the capacity. I'm not blaming you. I'm not blaming you. But you're putting into capacity. You are doing, even on this one here, when you got 2 of them, the toilet is flushing. The capacity, in my opinion, becomes the issue. Because the amount of people, whether you have the 1 meter or you got 6 meters, the water is flowing and the sewage is flowing, which goes towards capacity. We have to pay for it. As a city, we have to pay for it. So what do we do? So what do we do then for those 20 businesses or so forth who are not paying in? Let me ask you this. Are you using the system? Should you not pay something since you're using the system?
Well, I don't have any problem paying something.
And that's why the new one we came out is substantially less. Substantially less.
It seems like it's more.
Okay.
No.
Well, like I said, okay, and that's fine. Yes, sir.
I appreciate the fairness. I think everybody here wants to be fair.
Right.
And I think you also talked about if you're using it, then you should pay for it. And I don't think you would get any disagreement there. My name's Tommy McIntosh. I built a building over on 441 Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Trindle Beach. I built it in 2005, 2006, somewhere there. 4,000 square feet. I was planning to put somewhere between 35 and 40 realtors in that building. So I would have been a single user with 45 bodies in that building if my plans would have worked out. But because of the economy, real estate died. I have more on that building 10 years later than it is worth. Can't sell it, can't do anything with it, trying not to let my credit go bad because of a dead building and a struggling family. So, under this system, I would be in tier 1 and I would have had 40 people there, my plan would have worked out. 40 people would have been flushing and brushing teeth and washing and whatever else goes on in an office during the course of the day. Now, I am renting out individual offices, and I have an attorney in there, I have a builder in there, I have a real estate broker in there, I built my building to your codes, I did everything you guys wanted. But I would be under block 5 probably, with 7 users. And maybe 10 people going in and out of that building during the day. So I could have been a single user with 40 people and been in block 1. I got multi-users in there now with 25% of the activity that I was anticipating. Let's talk about fair. Who's using more? I would have used more under the original plan. So this whole single user versus multiple users in there, it really needs to be based on the number of bodies that are actually using it. And the way that it has always been fair in the past is you pay based on your flow. We all have meters, charges based on the flow. It doesn't matter how many users are in there, it matters how much goes through that meter. That's where the cost is.
Agreed.
You would have only had one restroom for 24 people?
No, I built it to code, I had 2 restrooms.
Okay. And 1 meter?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the time, it was one building establishment, one business.
It was actually 2 suites, so there may be 2 meters, I'm not sure. But it was designed to be 2 suites.
Okay.
And
I got you.
now it is, you know, I'm doing what I can to hold my building. And to go from, I think my cost had been somewhere around $100 a month, and suddenly it went up to $400 a month.
Well, we're rectifying that.
And I appreciate it, and I understand that.
I got you.
I've got 6 or 7 businesses there in this town, and some of them are people that are based elsewhere, and they come here and they have an office because they do consulting. I've got a forester who consults. I've got attorneys who do closings. I mean, there are people that need to come into this town and provide a service, a valuable service, and to add to their cost of doing business, add to their burden, really is not fatal. I mean, your commercial entities are the ones in this community that are providing jobs. And this is a penalty on the folks who are actually trying to provide jobs.
Clarify that for me. You say it's a penalty. What about every other business that's paying it?
I'm paying it.
That's what I'm saying.
I'll pay
What
what
about?
the prevailing-
But you say it's a penalty, and I'm trying to understand, and I'm not trying to be a smart aleck. What about every other business who is paying? Is it a penalty? Is it a penalty to them?
If they are using a restroom,
Just
or
a business.
using, no, I'm trying to answer your question. So
And I appreciate it.
if they are using a restroom that's hooked to a meter, they're paying based on flow. Somebody is paying. That bill is going to someone, and they are paying. It doesn't matter what their business card says.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me talk.
I appreciate it, sir.
All right, and
Can somebody tell me on the meter reading in May, it says 290 is consumed, what is that, 2,900 gallons? That's what my 7 people use, 22,900 gallons. I paid that month, after we did that thing last time, my bill went from 146 to 430.
Understand. That's why we're here.
Yeah, the water, it was everything, the total bill.
Mm-hmm.
The sewer bill went up to $296 because if you use a gallon of water, the sewer costs more than the water does.
That's correct.
What we've got, I feel like, and I think this is important in your workshop, we have had, and Scott, Mr. Walker can speak to this, we had a commission that designed this sewer based on what the engineers were telling him. The main man stood right there. He was making $150 an hour. He said in our commission meeting, and we paid him. And I asked him, did you test a sewer here in Hot Springs, a septic tank? He said, we don't know how to do that. We don't have the degrees to do it. They used the Orange County Our water table is 40 feet. Orange County is standing in it. So it wasn't a fair thing. We turned down a concrete plant. A guy, Anderson Construction, offered to pay a railroad from Bradford to here $5 million and nothing cost the city a dime to make an inland port. They turned it down. And that's the highest taxpayer in Newberry right now. They collect more money off of that cement plant than any other business there.
Okay, excuse me.
Yes. I just had an email from a citizen who's watching this. They said they cannot hear people who are talking to the audience. The next time they just receive.
Come up to the podium, please. All right.
I'll hush, I talk a lot. Got some medicine this week from VA and said this may make you talk a little. But I'm only concerned that we talked about fair. And I don't care what you do, you ain't never gonna make it fair. It wasn't fair from the start. We should have never had a sewer system. I got a book that thick written by Dr. Wisemantle from University of Florida. Who am I, Dean Davis?
No. What I'm saying is, we can't keep rehashing what that's done. We can't go back and
That's
change
right,
that.
but we can't.
But we can try and make it better with what we ought to do.
Well, then everybody in town, I think my solution, Mayor, would be to let everybody that's a citizen pay a part of this mistake made by a commission. I think they did it in 2007, they started with it. It was some big mistakes made, and y'all didn't make them.
No.
I didn't make them. And we tried to correct it. But it's not fair to charge me and the other man that said, I got 7 tenants. If you do that and I have to make them pay it, they're going to leave. And that's not economic development. That's the reverse of it. I beg of you, just divide it by the number of citizens and let everybody, I'd be willing to do that. I'm paying a fire assessment fee.
Yes.
One more question is, if you do add this tiered fee, and it's probably a question directed to you, could you potentially do a separate billing for each business versus adding it on to the landlord's bill? Because then it would be easier to terminate it at the time that that business was no longer there or changed hands or whatever. So that might be something, if you are going to go into these tiers, that you should not bill the landlord. You should, at the renewal of the occupational license, let the business know, okay, this is what's going to happen now. And then the business can make the decision about whether they can absorb that cost versus having this trickle-down effect that's happened with this other ordinance, okay? So that would be a recommendation. And then the other question is, could you write into whatever ordinance you might put together to go back and refund the fees that were charged to the landlords during the period of time, I believe it was 2 months that those fees showed up on the bill, because that was an undue burden and really not enough notice or discussion had occurred about it. So that would be my request to you as a commission, if you could do that. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Tommy McIntosh, Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. I want to be clear. While Dean Davis is one of my good friends, I am glad that we have the sewer. It's something that this town has needed. It probably wasn't done in the best fashion when you look in hindsight, and you folks have the pleasure of trying to work through that. And I applaud you for doing it, and I applaud you for tackling it. I'm not complaining about the sewer. I'm prepared to pay my fair share, whatever my fair share is. So the whole argument of fairness, I'm all aboard with. I like the idea of if there's some way you could look at the occupational license and put a sewer surcharge on that so that every registered business in the community pays something. That.
Let me before you go. I think I addressed that back before. I believe the bond and so forth does not allow us to do that, because I questioned, and exactly what Dean was saying was to basically, this is a full city project. Whether or not you're on it, It impacts the entire city.
Yep.
Therefore, the cost should be spread. I believe the bond does not allow that. We looked into it, and it was not permitted.
Well, and
Right, only the people on it, so it is restricted.
in dealing with the inequities that have gone on in, as far as this system being installed is a tough problem. I still think it comes back to flow. It comes back to the amount of gallons that are going through it, and that goes through your meter. It doesn't matter if you got one person in your household or 20 people in your household should pay on flow. It doesn't matter if you got one business in your commercial structure or 20 businesses in your commercial structure. You got meters, you can gauge the flow. That's where your fairness is. That's where the equity is in this whole system. And that's the way it's worked for a long, long time. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm going to come up one more time and then I'll be quiet. So if you added this $14.98 charge that's for the additional user on the 2-user tier, the difference between the base amount and the 2-user tier is $14.98. So I'm going to round that up to 15. So if you just took every business that's in a building where there isn't a separate meter and you created an account for them and you charge them $15 a month for their contribution to the water and sewer, the end result would be more than what's on this chart right now, and it would be equally distributed in a manner that would be probably easy to manage no matter how small your business is. So that might be something that you want to look at in lieu of these different tiers, is just that each business within the building is surcharged an additional $15 a month to cover these costs of the water and the sewer portion for that additional business. It might be a simpler way to do it, okay?
No one else? All right, well, we have some suggestions that we can discuss and see what our final outcome will be. Any comments from the panel?
I sincerely appreciate you guys showing up. Mr. Davis and I have had multiple conversations when he was on the board and being off of it. I'm going to agree with you what you pay for the consumption now. And I'll be honest with you, where my conflict is not in the flow, because that doesn't change. The rates-free consumption will not change. My conflict that I deal with is we have people who are using the system and therefore they're paying the base rate. And I understand this is grandfathered and you know, you've been there. When I say grandfathered, you've been there. But by the fact that you have 4 businesses, 4 storefronts, that make a difference? If it's 4 storefronts under 1 meter as opposed to 1 building on a meter, if I have 4 storefronts that use 1 meter, each with a different address, does that make a difference, even though they all run through the meter? No, that's a legitimate question. Does it make a difference? I'll ask you. Okay.
And I guess I don't understand your argument. Because it's counterintuitive to the number of times the toilet flushes.
No, I didn't say the flow doesn't change. I said that your charge, the rate doesn't change. What you're charged. In this thing here, that doesn't charge. Your consumption rate doesn't change, is what I say. I apologize if I misstated that. I apologize.
So as more water goes through, you automatically pay for it.
Yes.
Because your flow is increased.
Yes. I don't.
You have a line of people at that storefront that go in and use the restroom and flush the toilet, and then go out and another one comes in. Did I be up here?
Yeah.
Yes.
I apologize.
If you have a line of people that go in that storefront go use the restroom, flush it, wash their hands. If that repeats 20 times in the next 20 minutes, then that business is going to pay more.
Yes.
It has to.
I don't dispute that. I'm agreeing 100% on that.
So my argument is, if the base rate that you're charging is not enough to pay what you need to pay, raise the base rate. I'm okay with that, as long as everybody's paying the same base rate.
But everybody's not. In my opinion, everybody's not. That's where I'm coming from. You have businesses who aren't paying the base rate.
Well, whoever is in charge of paying the bill on that meter is the one that's going to have to figure out how to allocate those costs. In my case, I'm going to eat whatever cost y'all charge. If you charge $1,000 a month, I'm going to end up eating it. And it's just going to be another $1,000 negative than I am per month on that building. Everything that y'all put on me now just is that much more I'm losing. It's not like I got this asset that is making me a ton of money over there. It is, fortunately, I got businesses in other locations that have let me not walk away from this building and leave you with an empty building here, because there ain't no other users that want it right now.
Thank you. No, I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And one quick thing, and then I'll
All right, Mr. Davis.
as you deliberate, and I know all of y'all personally, and I know that you're not crooks and you're not trying to cheat anybody, but my building contributes to the city of High Springs $1,000 a year cash property taxes. I bought that building in 1975. I have paid enough in property taxes to have bought it 10 more times, and I got nothing for it until they paved 236. Some of us went over there and howled, and they paved it. But it was way past due. Also, the city light bill, Duke Energy, they call it a franchise fee. That is not a franchise fee. I told y'all when I was on the commission, I don't care what color you paint it and what you call it, it's a tax. It's 20% of your light bill. They get that. If you got a cell phone and you talk on it, the city gets, thanks to Mr. Eppenstein, you get that. And he said if Mr. Eppenstein is gone, but he said in a newspaper article that if we were committed to keeping the cost at $30, it's $64 if you paid it, because we taking the money out of the water fund and paying for it. He said, and if you go over $30, there's people in High Springs that'll make the difference between them having beans for supper or meat. The city of High Springs was offered a package unit downtown, free. Wouldn't cost anybody anything. Swanee Water Management and I don't remember the other one, EPA, I think, voted. They said, we'll fix it for you. They turned it down and went and did this thing we got stuck. And we didn't do it. None of y'all did it, but we stuck with it. I called somebody and asked about getting my money back, told I couldn't have it. And I said, well, what if I got a place? And I do. I have 2 people that share one bathroom. I can divide that by 2. No, if they've got a business license, they got to pay it. That means that a business license in my building will cost, instead of $30, it'll cost $730 to do business in High Springs. And I can tell you, a small, struggling business is not going to open up in High Springs with that kind of and I can name you names of people that have already gone to Lake City, which they're no better than we are, I don't think. They must word it better. We just need to follow their guide. I know we got to get out of debt. I don't know how many $1 million we in debt. 13. Mm-hmm. And we'll never get paid the way we're going. So I think the only way to do it is going to be fair to everybody. Is take the number of people living in High Springs and divide it into what we owe and charge it. I'll pay my part. I don't mind. Already do. Please pray over it and do the right thing, the fair thing. It's not fair to me to have to. I'm paying. I'm not going to charge them. I got to pay $750 a year for 7 people. Do the math.
Thank you.
No, I don't really care what you do. I'm going to survive. You're not going to break me. I'm going to have enough money I can pay my bills.
All right.
You're going at it the wrong way. In other words, if the water is being metered, it's being paid for. you can't charge for it twice. What you need to do is to get off the water and go to the occupational license. You've got occupational license. Every one of those tenants Dean's got has an occupational license. You just need to go up on the fees on occupational license and leave the water alone, or either make them put in separate water meters for everyone. And that's a lot of expense for the city or for the property owner. So it just doesn't make sense to try to charge twice for the same water. In my situation, I've got a tenant, and we got 2 bathrooms. And it's been that way for years. It was that way when my grandmother had the house up there. The granddaddy built it in 1902. So it's been there a long time. And but that same water meter's out there. But you're trying to charge for it twice, and you can't do that. That's illegal. Even if this gentleman over here tells you it is legal, it ain't legal. But anyway, I think the way to go is to raise your occupational license if you're out desperate for money. And it looks like that's what you are. You're just trying to get some more money. Is that right, Mr. Manager?
No, sir, it really isn't. It is, see, you're saying that it's the water going through the meter. What we're saying is that everybody pays the base rate. And those businesses that only have 1 meter are only paying 1 base rate. And we're saying if you got 7 businesses on 1 meter, each one of those businesses should be paying a base rate, not just for flushing the toilet twice. It's not any different than my house. I pay a base rate, and that's basically covers more than the water I pay for.
What happens if your mother-in-law moves in with you and she's got an apartment there? Is that going to be...
You're not allowed to.
No.
Huh?
She can't do that.
No, Bobby, it wouldn't.
You don't have a mother-in-law.
Bobby, it wouldn't.
Thank you.
It wouldn't.
No.
In that case, it wouldn't.
But
Did you say license couldn't be?
You can't do it.
Okay.
Oh, we're going to have to cut this soon.
I'm sorry, but could y'all clarify that? In the residential instance, when we had the downturn and we had multi-generations moving in one house because that's what they could afford, there was only 1 base rate going on in that house,
that's true.
and we don't want to charge more than 1 base rate to a house. But you do want to charge more than 1 base rate to a business or to a commercial structure that has that same kind of dynamic going on in it.
I would say they're apples and oranges. Me personally, to me, that's not even in the same ballpark.
Well, I mean,
And I'm not getting. I'm just saying I see it completely different.
you're elected and you get to make the decisions, and I understand.
I appreciate your comments because I'm going to consider them, but I'm just saying to me they're apples and oranges.
One of the suggestions that's come up is let each business buy their own meter.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to look at my building, and I've only got 3 toilets that it could hook to, so I don't know how I would have 7 meters going to supply 3 toilets. That doesn't make sense to me either. So, I mean, you got a tough situation, and I understand it, but if you're going to look at fairness, please consider all sides, and I appreciate you doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is that anybody else up here? No? Okay. Now we're gonna close this out. If y'all give me a motion, we'll close this one out. So moved. Okay. Meeting adjourned.
Yes, ma'am. We'll put